Hi, I'm Val.
Hi, I'm Kayla.
Welcome to the York CRC.
Hello, my name is Gordon Marwick. I'm Chairman of the York Community Resource Centre. I've been involved in the York community for 50 years of my adult life. I was awarded the Freeman of the Shire of York for my 50 years involvement. And 10 years ago I was asked to come and join the York Community Resource Centre, a position which I gratefully accepted. I've been the chairman ever since. In my time in York and my 50 years of community involvement, the last 10 years has been the most pleasurable. It's fantastic to be involved in the CRC family, the CRC network. I have a great committee, I have a fantastic staff, and we have a motto in York that we're the glue that holds the York community together. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of my staff, and I love my community.
Like most CRCs, we provide essential services to our community, such as printing, photocopying, other secretarial services, room hire and catering, grant writing and business support, public computer and internet access, community events, school holiday programs, youth programs, training and traineeships.
To achieve our goals, we work closely with key community groups, the York Police, the York Shire, York District High School, Goodajada Aboriginal Corporation and local businesses. It takes a whole community to make a success, and we pride ourselves in supporting ours with everything we have.
Hello, this is Cherie from the Walpole CRC. I've decided to show you what the Walpole CRC does by showing you all the front pages where Walpole CRC is instrumental in that front page story. It includes Buddhist teachings in Walpole, Be Connected. We organised street numbers for the emergency services, crisis and emergency relief support following the COVID-19. We celebrate people's years of service in their various capacities. JobKeeper was a huge one. We found that many of our sole traders didn't understand that they may be eligible, and we estimate that we brought 2.5 million into the community with that. So have a look and you'll see all the events that we did, organising health information and all sorts. So if it can't be done by a CRC, it can't be done by anybody. Thank you.
Boyup Brook is located in the southwest, 270 kilometres from Perth. The CRC is a Bendigo Bank agency and we support the community with grants. We're a Services Australia access point and produce the Boyup Gazette. We offer development and training opportunities for local businesses. We provide plenty of creative activities such as the annual Art Awards, photography competition and workshops for all ages and interests. Our school holiday programs are always popular, with different activities every holidays. A diverse range of other programs and services are offered for the community, and our Be Connected Seniors Computing program has been a hit. Our recycling hub is growing, with some exciting activities on the horizon. And our seniors exercise classes are so valuable for the participants and are creating great partnerships throughout the community.
Hi, my name's Lauren. I'm the coordinator of Wellstead CRC. At the moment we've got a bit of a busy bee doing a clean up. We've got our Tidy Towns judges coming next week. At the CRC we've got computers, a library, coffee shop most importantly. People love to come to our events and workshops, so if you're in the area make sure you stop by for a coffee.
We achieve everything we do by working hard and finding out what our community really needs. We'll plan whatever event or workshop might be relevant, and then we seek funding to make it happen if we need to. We add relevance and value to our community by being here. We're the friendly face that they see when they walk in. We're always happy to help with whatever problem it might be, big or small or very odd sometimes. We keep our skills and our technology current and as up to date as possible, and we provide workshops and training that is relevant to our community.
So now, as I mentioned before, we have Gihan who's going to lead us through the next session. I do need to read out his introduction because it's just divine. Our next speaker is a business futurist who has been using the internet since 1987, long before many people knew it existed. He is the author of Disruption by Design, The Future of Leadership, and 10 other books. Forbes magazine rated him number 5 social media influencer in the world and number 1 in Australia in his area of expertise. I can only claim that in Wongan Hills. For a glimpse of tomorrow's world, please welcome speaker, author and chocoholic, Gihan Perera.
Thanks very much, Liz. It's great to be here, and I've been here for the whole day, so it's really been interesting to listening to some of these conversations, because today is all about planning for the future. So I want to tell you a bit about our future today, because I reckon we all want to know what's coming up in the future, right? What do you want to know? How long are you going to live? When will we get a vaccine? Lotto numbers? What if I told you that I recently came face to face with the future in the most unexpected way when I went on a journey into my past? So once upon a time, there was a thing called international travel. And a few years ago, I went on a holiday to Sri Lanka with my parents. Now, this is the country where I was born, but I hadn't been there for more than 30 years. So as you can imagine, it was quite an amazing experience. So sometimes I felt inspired, sometimes I felt crowded, sometimes I even felt tall. It was great. You know, Sri Lanka is more famous for tea than coffee, but really, it's just a country of 24 million short blacks. So, why am I sharing this with you? Not because I think you want to see my holiday photos, but if you do, come up to me at afternoon tea. I've got a whole other slide deck prepared. But I want to tell you about a conversation that I had on the very last day that I was there. See, I went with my dad to visit one of his old school friends. In the middle of the photo, that's my dad with the camera around his neck and his friend standing next to him. But on the far left of this photo is his friend's grandson, Rajiv. He's a giant by Sri Lankan standards. He's 5'6", and he works in IT. Now, that doesn't mean he works in a call center. He set up a software company with 3 of his mates. It's done really well now. It's floated on the US Stock Exchange. Because what they do is they analyze satellite photographs of shopping center car parks. So looking at the traffic coming in and out, he can tell a retailer where to build, when to expand, what are the best opening hours, even what products to stock in each season. And they've got clients all around the world. In Australia, they work with Target and Woolworths. So there are lots of people who will tell you that technology has changed the world and our world is changing faster than ever before. But I reckon when a bloke in boardies and sandals, working from his home office in Colombo, Sri Lanka, can tell me what I can buy in my local Woolies, that's when we know the world has changed. Do you agree? Yes. It's changed in 3 big ways. It's fast, it's flat, and it's free. So let's talk about that, and I'll tell you what that means for us globally, what it means for Australia, and also what it means for us here in Western Australia. And I kind of want to give you the external picture. So today is both internal and external. So we had lots of conversations already about what's happening within the network with your own CRCs. I also want to give you the external picture. So we start with free first. The things that used to cost a lot now cost a lot less. And you know this if you've downloaded a song on iTunes or Spotify instead of buying a CD. You know this if you download an ebook to your Kindle instead of buying a paperback. I always look around at this point to see if there are any millennials like Gen Ys or younger Gen Zs who are going, what's a CD? What's a paperback? This is an interesting question, and the answer's changed in the last year that I've been asking this question. True confession time. Who's ever walked into a shop, tried on some clothes, or maybe tested some technology, thinking I can go back home later and buy it online for half the price? Yeah, actually, I'm seeing fewer people now put up their hands because we're trying to support local communities more. But this is one of the changes that's happened because people expect more for less. And it's because of technology. Technology has enabled a lot of our changes. And technology has made our world faster. Do you know there's more computing power in the first digital watch than in the spaceship that put a man on the moon, if you believe that even existed, that happened? So, and can you just imagine, actually, let me ask a real question here, right? Are there any Gen Ys in the room, so Gen Y or Gen Z, 40 or younger? Yeah, there's a few, yeah. I usually see a few aspiring Gen Ys as well. But for the Gen Ys in the room and the Gen Zs, I need to tell you what a watch is, right? So I know we have watches now, but you know, the watch was a mobile device that we had in the 20th century, and it could tell the time and nothing else. Right? That's crazy, isn't it? Such old technology. But it's like this, putting a man on the moon. In a few years, we'll be able to send people to other planets far beyond our solar system. Quick show of hands, who'd like to go in a spaceship and go to another planet? Who can think of somebody else who'd like to put in a spaceship and send to another planet? Yeah, right, okay, yeah. Don't point to them. It's the same with me, right? So for me, it's like, bye-bye, Kim Kardashian. What? Okay, that's not very fair. Any of the Kardashians would do, right? But here's a point. So we don't have that technology yet, but that's not the problem. See, here's a problem with that whole Kardashians in space scenario, right? In a few years' time, you'd be able to get in a spaceship with Kim and Chloe and Courtney, head off to another planet far beyond our solar system. But before you get there, long before you get there, you'll be overtaken by another spaceship that left Earth years after you did, but with better technology. So why would you get on that one? You might as well wait, right? But this one's got the same problem. Before it gets there, it gets overtaken by another spaceship, and so on. And the problem is, the paradox is, it doesn't make sense for any one of them to leave Earth, and yet, until one of them does, nothing happens. And you may think that's crazy, but I bet you do the same with a lot of things in your life. Maybe around technology. Oh, I should get the iPhone, got the iPhone 10, should upgrade to the 11, but Apple will bring out the 12 and the 13 and whatever after that, so I'll wait. I need a new iPad, but Google and Samsung will bring out a phone and glasses combined, so I'll wait. The pace of change sometimes gets in the way of us making progress. And we're going to have a workshop in the afternoon later on, and I'm going to ask you to think about what you're going to do in the future. Don't get caught in the trap of going, oh, I'll just wait for a faster spaceship before we get started. The third thing that's happened is our world is flat. The internet's broken down barriers between people and companies, even countries. Just look at this map here. Valerie Pieris pointed out there are more people living inside that circle than outside it. Right? So almost 8 billion people on the planet, almost 4 billion of them live inside that circle. So China's got 1.4 billion, India 1.3, Indonesia 250 million, Bangladesh 160 million. Further down the list, Sri Lanka, where I was born, 23, 24 million. Same size as Tasmania, same population pretty much as all of Australia. Right? And you can see how the power's shifted in the last 200 years. In the 19th century, it came from here, from the muzzle of a musket. The 20th century, it came from here, driven by the dollar. In the 21st century, it's coming from here. This is true people power. And this is what we face in our fast, flattened, free world. And you may think, oh, these are people who are outside Australia, but people power brings economic power. So for most of the last 50 years, our world economy has been dominated by 7 countries. So the USA and Canada, the UK, France, Italy, Germany, and Japan, the G7. But PwC reckons that by 2030, which is only 10 years from now, the economic power of the G7 is going to be matched by what they call the emerging markets, the E7, which will share that economic power. So we've got Brazil and Mexico, Turkey and Russia, India, China, and Indonesia. And then if you look ahead another 20 years, the power of the G7's faded, And we're going to have another 7 countries, which are the frontier markets, or the F7, which are also going to share that economic power. So we've got Peru and Colombia, Nigeria and Morocco, the Philippines, Bangladesh and Vietnam. This is what our world is going to look like less than a generation from now. Right? Now, if you look at those G7, E7, F7 countries, there's one country that doesn't appear on any one of those lists, right? So what does this mean for us here in Australia? Well, let me ask you a little quick quiz question about another country. If I said to you which country is famous for watches, chocolate, cheese and cuckoo clocks, what would you say? Switzerland. Yeah, right, okay. And there are a lot of benefits to living in Switzerland. For starters, their flag is a big plus. Oh. Actually, can I just say a quick thank you to the few people who laughed at that? Because when I road tested that joke on my 15-year-old niece, she said, if they laugh at that, they're just being kind. But my point, and I do have one, is that some people are now calling Australia the Switzerland of Asia. And this is even pre-COVID. And if you think about objectively, anywhere in the world that you could choose to live, what sort of criteria would you be looking for if you could choose anywhere in the world? Maybe a country with a democratic government, maybe a country with a reasonably good health system and high life expectancy. I know it's not true in all communities, but generally it's true. Now, reasonably COVID-19 safe. So this and a few other criteria, if you think about this objectively, there's never been a better time to live and work than here and now in Australia. And for us in Western Australia, it's even better because we live in the world's best time zone. Because you think a really interconnected world, a really global world, if you split up the world into 24 time zones for an hour at a time, we live in the most populous time zone. There are more people living in our time zone than anywhere else. And in a really interconnected world, that matters more than ever before. Number 2 is India and Sri Lanka, and then we look at like eastern parts of Europe. It's not until we get to 5, 6, 7 that we even get a place like the USA. Okay, and of course we shouldn't forget our other fellow Australians on the other side of the country. They live in the 21st best time zone in the world. Right? So of course technology makes a difference, but it's not technology that's powering the world, it's what technology enables. And what it enables, and I've heard so many examples of this morning as well as elsewhere, is that it enables people. And there are more people who say this, who say, I matter. And I don't mean in an egocentric, I'm the center of the universe kind of way, because I hope you probably know people like that. I hope you're not people like that. But these are the people who are innovative and inspired, care about their communities. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait to be told. They just get stuff done. Let me show you some examples of that. So a couple of young people. These are 2 young girls who run Charlie's Crafty Kitchen, 2 Australian girls. Has anyone heard of them? Okay, so they've been around for a while, so this is slightly old photos, about 3 or 4 years old. But let me introduce you. There's 8-year-old Charlie on the right and her 5-year-old sister, Ashley, on the left. They host one of the world's biggest food and cooking YouTube channels. Okay, and all they do is they do these little videos showing kids how to make icy pops and stuff like that, right? And they get millions of visitors every month. Now, it's on YouTube, so it's all free, but because of all the traffic that they get, they earn a little bit of pocket money from Google advertising. Whoops. They're not even the people who earned the most money on YouTube. 2 years ago, 2018, the person who earned the most money on YouTube from Google advertising was this little 7-year-old kid. And all he does is he does these little videos of him playing games and opening toys and stuff like that. And in 2018, he earned $11 million US from Google advertising, from YouTube advertising. And just to prove it wasn't a fluke, the next year, last year, he earned $38 million Australian from his advertising. So my point is this, right? Like 10 years ago, nobody could have done that because TV used to control visual access to the masses. Now, YouTube was around then, and of course we still have TV now, but TV doesn't control things anymore. So this is my other little niece, Maggie. She's 9 now, but this is a photo of her when she was about 6 with her dad, my little brother. And I remember babysitting her at the time, and I said, Mags, would you like to watch some TV? And she said, no thanks, because you can't choose. Right? And you think it's not just TV, it's things like newspapers, which used to control access not just to news, but real estate and jobs and entertainment, but it just doesn't anymore. So we, in our communities, large and small, we now get to influence, say, where you might go for your next holiday, or even where you might get your next job. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing today, and we're going to have a little bit of a look at what's in the future and what that means for us. So Liz was very kind to introduce me as a futurist, and some people don't know what a futurist is, and you think that I can predict the future. It's not true, but I think to establish my credentials, I reckon I probably should do a little bit of predicting the future. So I'm going to do a little bit of a magic trick, a card trick. Now, some people are going to go, okay, what's a card trick got to do with our future? It's not relevant, but I can tell you there are 3 really important things that you will learn from this that are essential for us being fit for the future. So Liz, I made a prediction here. You don't need to get up, you can just stay there. There's something in there, don't open it. Just make sure I don't go anywhere near it, right? And I normally do this with a pack of cards, but I've got now the COVID-safe version of this. So I'm going to use my invisible pack of cards. You'll have to play along with me for this. And I'm going to ask a number of people in the audience to help me out here. So with my invisible pack of cards, you can see, I think it's, is it Nigel? Yeah, Nigel. I think you can see I've split my invisible pack of cards into blacks and reds. If I asked you, you can do this all from your seat, to take either the blacks or the reds, which one would you take? Okay, so I'm just going to chuck those over to you. Great. Okay, so you've got the blacks. Can you separate them into, in one hand, have the clubs, and the other hand have the spades? Just hold them up here, over your head. And ma'am, if you could just point to either the clubs or the spades. You can point to? Yeah. Clubs, okay. Can you just pretend to grab them from Nigel? Okay, so you've got the clubs there. Just if you take them in your hands like this, and this time, oh good, you've done it already. Can you split them up into? You can see in one hand she's got the picture cards, which is the Jack, the Queen, and the King, and in the other hand she's got the numbers, which is Ace to 10. Ma'am, perhaps behind, can you choose either pictures or numbers? Pictures, great. Grab those picture cards. So that the clubs and the pictures, so it's Jack, Queen, and King of Clubs. Okay, so those are the 3 cards you've got there. Can you please take 2 of them and chuck them to me? Oh, no, don't give them to me because I don't want to touch the cards. You might think I'm cheating. So can you give them to someone behind you? Just 2 of them. Now you can choose which 2 she gave you. There's a Jack of Clubs, Queen of Clubs, and King of Clubs. Which 2 did she give you? The Jack and the King? Okay, great. So you've got the Jack and the King, and if you can, it's Gab, right? Yeah, okay. So you've got the Jack and the King, Jack of Clubs and King of Clubs. Gab, can you throw one of them to me, either the Jack or the King? Okay. Which one did you throw me? Jack. The Jack? Are you sure? You can swap, because it's a very important decision. You sure? Okay. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, by process of elimination, we've got 1 card left. It's a Jack of Clubs, as you can all see. Liz, can you open the prediction I made earlier, please, and just show everyone? And in case you can't see it at the back, of course, it's a Jack of Clubs, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, thank you. Wow. Thank you. Okay, wow, okay. All right, so this is a really smart audience. I'm sure you've all figured out how it's done. Oh, what, do you want me to explain it to you? Okay, all right. All right, I'll explain it to you, but don't tell anyone else. So here's how it works. So first of all, it's always going to be the Jack of Clubs because that's the only card I've got, right? So the way it works is that whatever response I get from the room, I interpret it the way I want. So the Jack of Clubs stays in and the other cards get eliminated. So first of all, when Nigel had the choice between the reds and the blacks, I said, take the reds or the blacks. He took the blacks, fine. If you'd taken the reds, I'd go, great, now let me take the blacks and hold up the clubs and spades, and then point to clubs or spades. If you point to clubs, you get to keep it. If you point to spades, that gets eliminated, and keep going. At the very end, when Gab had the jack and the king, if she'd throw me the jack, which she did, I hold it up. If she'd throw me the king, then she gets to be the hero, and she holds up the card that's left. All right? All right, don't tell anyone how it's done. Okay, but the serious side to this is, as I said, there are three things that are essential that you can learn from this that'll help us be fit for the future. Okay, so the first one is this, that I knew what outcome I was going for, right? So I had to be willing to take the lead to lead us towards that outcome, regardless of what was going on around me. I had no idea what the responses were, but I had to be willing to drive it to the outcome that I wanted and take the lead. The second thing was, I could have done that with just one person, back and forth, but it's a much better experience when you involve everybody and go wider. And the third thing is, anyone who's ever done any kind of magic tricks as a kid, you know it's never about the secret. It's always about how you engage with the audience and the humour and the banter and all the silly things that go on, that's what makes the real magic. So in this time where everyone says I matter, and everyone has access to stuff that they've never had before, these are the three things that will help us all be fit for the future. So number one, for all of us, to take the lead in our communities, in our roles, in our families. The second thing is to go broader in the community, and in this group, you're already doing that, and I'm going to recommend that you go even broader. And the last one is to engage more deeply with the people you're already working with. When Albert Einstein was teaching at Princeton University, he was criticised one year because he gave his students the same exam 2 years in a row. But he said, the questions are the same, but the answers are different. Right? Now, I'm no Einstein, but I reckon the same thing applies today. Some of the questions that we're asking are exactly the same as we've always asked. How do we serve our community? How do we secure funding? How do we manage the change that's happening? But some of the answers might be different. So let's have a look at some of those questions and answers. And let's start off with this area of you taking the lead. So I've got a little bit of a puzzle for you to start with. This is another puzzle with cards, but these are not normal cards. So let me explain what they are. This is not a trick question, but it's a logic puzzle. So there are 4 cards here, and I can tell you that all the cards have a picture on the front. Right? So you can see there's a fish and a dragon on 2 of the cards that you can see, and it's got a solid colour on the back. So you can see there's a red and a yellow. And if I make this statement, that every red back card has a dragon on the front, then is it true or false? Now, that's actually not the question I'm asking you, because I reckon some of you have already figured out that you can't tell for sure, right? You have to guess. You need to turn over some of the cards to be able to tell me for sure whether that statement's true or false. You don't need to turn over all the cards. You could, and you get the answer, but you don't need to turn them all over. So my real question that I'm asking you is, which cards must you turn over to be able to tell me for sure whether that's true or false? So I'm going to play a little bit of funky music for 30 seconds, have a socially distanced chat to the person next to you, and figure out which cards you must turn over to be able to tell me for sure whether it's true or false. All right, how do you go? All right, so let me give you some answers. Okay, so first of all, there's 2 easy options out of 4. You definitely need to turn over number 1, because you want to see whether there's a dragon on the other side. The other easy one is you don't need to turn over number 3, because it doesn't matter what's on the other side, because it doesn't have a red back. You also don't need to turn over number 4, right? Because if it has a red back, it doesn't give you any extra information. And if it has a yellow or a blue or a black, then it just becomes irrelevant, like number 3. You do need to turn over number 2, because if it's got a red back, then the statement's false. Okay, so that's the answer 1 and 2. Who got that in this room? Okay, a few people did. Who'd like to argue about it with me over afternoon tea? Okay, yeah, right, okay. So here's the thing, right? Most people get number 1, but they don't get number 2, because there's no red, there's no back, and there's no dragon. And I reckon when we're looking at our future, we've got 2 kinds of futures. So one of them, like number 1, is the one that we can see what's coming up in the future. It might be challenging, but at least we can see it. But the second kind, and it's especially true now with all the uncertainty that COVID has created, even in a place like Western Australia, is a future that we can't see. So we need new skills, and we need to be agile and flexible, create plans and have backup plans, and still be able to lead and navigate in that uncertainty. And as I said, we need some different skills than maybe have worked for us in the past. So what are those skills? So the Institute for the Future has done some research, and they've identified 10 skills, and they call these 10 future work skills, but they actually apply in all life, in your personal life as well as your work life. So I'm going to tell you what the 10 skills for the future are, but again, I reckon we've got a smart room here. What do you reckon some of them might be? So for example, when I ask this question, people say things like creativity, problem solving. What else? Just call them out. We don't need a microphone for this. What else do you think some of the skills for the future might be? Time management, flexibility, resilience, data analysis, empathy, open-mindedness, communication, imagination, emotional intelligence, teamwork. Okay, fantastic. So I reckon you got some of them. Let me share with you what the 10 skills as identified by the Institute for the Future are. By the way, whenever I show this slide, people want to take a photo of it. You have my permission to take photos of any of the slides in my presentation. So if you want to take a photo, use it for yourself, share it with your team and your community, put it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Tinder, wherever you like, you're welcome to do that, right? So here are the 10. I've grouped them up into 3 areas. So one is taking information in from the world. The second one is how you use that information. And the last group are people's skills. So let's start with a really easy one. I know I didn't give you a lot of time, but many people, I reckon most, would have got this one. Cognitive load management. How many people got that? Okay. Yeah, okay. What about this one? Transdisciplinarity. Lots of people. Okay, this is not going as well as I thought. So here's a list of the 10. I reckon you did get most of these. So the time management, the 2020 name for that is cognitive load management. So we've got so much stuff coming into our brain, we've got to have the skills to be able to filter that. Emotional intelligence and social intelligence is understanding people. Creativity comes into things like novel and adaptive thinking. Transdisciplinarity, which we're just about to talk about, Nigel used a different word for it earlier, synthesizing and synthesis. Okay, so we're going to talk about, in this session, we'll talk about 3 things specifically. This one, transdisciplinarity. We'll talk about the idea of diversity and actually having diverse ideas and having people with diverse backgrounds, which gives you diverse thinking. And this idea of social intelligence, which is understanding the motivation behind people's behaviours. So this first one of transdisciplinarity is all about connecting things. It's seeing things from outside your normal day-to-day work. Maybe you think this is nothing to do with my CRC, but it might have some relevance. So I'm going to give you an example from, I'll pick a healthcare example, because many of us will be familiar with this. And then I'll give you some examples, which are, some of them may be related to regional communities, some of them may not, and especially in the workshop session that we're going to have later in the afternoon, I want you to practice the skill of transdisciplinarity. All right, so let's start with healthcare. You can imagine that in the not too distant future, when somebody has a heart attack, there'll be a self-driving ambulance that comes along to pick them up. Right? Now, it still might have a paramedic at the back, because we may not have a robot that's able to do that job, but it doesn't need a driver. But that's not the most important thing. At that time, in the future, or every vehicle on the road will be self-driving. So the ambulance, and they're all connected wirelessly, so they don't need flashing lights and a siren because they're all connected. Everyone else knows to give way to emergency vehicles. Along the way, there'll be probably a chip implanted under your skin that will send data to artificial intelligence software in the cloud that will do a diagnosis and tell the cardiologist so she's ready when the patient arrives on a doorstep. Also, there'll be a 3D printer in the ambulance that'll print a stent for that patient, for that operation, so that, again, it's ready for the cardiologist. And then a drone will be delivering the other equipment and medical supplies that are required for that operation, so hospitals and medical centres don't have to carry around and have inventory of all this expensive equipment. So all of this technology, it exists at the moment. It's not connected this way yet, but it exists. And I reckon if you're in healthcare, you should be thinking about things like this. And maybe even this, that all of that might become obsolete when we have this. This is nanotechnology, robotic surgery. So you're having a heart attack, you swallow a pill, and a tiny army of robots goes to work inside you doing the operation. What could possibly go wrong in that scenario? Right? But these are things we should be thinking about if we're thinking about healthcare. And I reckon if you're in healthcare, you should be thinking about those things, even though they aren't part of your normal everyday life. So especially when we get into the workshop later on, I want you to think big. Think about things that are outside that could have an influence on you in the next 2 to 5 to 6, 7 years. And one of the key mindset things around that is this mindset of being a possibility thinker. Somebody else earlier, I think it may have been Robin or maybe just Gab, who said, say yes and then figure out how. That's the whole idea of being a possibility thinker. So this is an early version of Google's self-driving car. And when I showed this, so like about 7 or 8 years ago, when most people hadn't heard about self-driving cars, I took this photo on my phone and showed it to people. And so when I showed it to my niece, who was about 7 at the time, her first response to that was, oh, that's really cool. Because she thought, oh, it's kind of cute, it looks like a little bit of a face, and she'd never driven a car, so she just thought that was cool and cute. When I showed it to adults, mostly the response was, oh no, yes, but people don't want to give up driving. Yes, but self-driving cars will never be as good as human drivers. Yes, but somebody will hack into it and steal my kids on the way to school. So they were always looking at reasons why things couldn't work. So they were going, yes, but, instead of going, yes, and, how can I make this work? And you may not be all the way over on the yes and, but I'd like you to think, well, maybe I'll go, that's interesting. I wonder what that could mean for us. So let me just give you a few things that are happening globally and locally and regionally. So one is, as I said, we're having this sentiment towards rebuilding Australia and supporting local suppliers. And that's definitely happening as a result of COVID. And we've heard lots of people talk about that already today. There's a bit of a myth that people are moving away from the regions and into the cities. It's not true. The research shows in the last 5 years, even pre-COVID, people are moving to the regions for a sea change, a tree change, and now even a COVID change. So the regions are growing, and they are going to continue to be an important part of Western Australia. Somebody mentioned earlier about things like online offerings. So as a result of international travel bans, people are trying to be creative, and they're creating things like virtual tourism, as well as creating, and I'll get to this other one soon, online collaboration. So we had a couple of CRCs talking about that earlier. So taking advantage of some of these online tools. I did some work with Food SA, Food South Australia, earlier this year, and they were, one of the innovative ideas there was, this is Barossa Fine Foods. They have a website, they have an online presence, and they were partnering with other local providers and allowing them to advertise their products on their website. So sharing expertise and making sure that they can complement each other's skills. We talked about Zoom. Cullen's Winery down south, they did a virtual wine tasting. They had a Chinese, they do a lot of work, they sent a lot of their wine to China. Their distributor in China ran a virtual wine tasting, and they had more than 4,000 people attending. And as a result, and this only happened during COVID. There's no reason they couldn't have done this over the last few years, but because people were used to using Zoom, it happened through COVID. And there's a shift in the cities to working from home, office-based people working from home, and there's a lot of that happening now. And I think the next step from that is organisations are going to realise that just because someone's working from home, it doesn't mean they have to be within commute distance in a major city. They don't. They could be working from anywhere. And again, this is tapping into the skills of people in regional Australia who don't want the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, daily commute into a big city, but that is going to be a growth area in the future. Telehealth, a couple of people spoke about that earlier, and as a result, telehealth is good. Telehealth is great, but in the first session, a couple of people talking about training seniors, and of course, people need new technology skills. Another thing that might be happening here that might be a threat to regions is people are looking for alternative food sources. These are crickets. So crickets, more than 2 billion people in the world eat insects. Has anyone here eaten crickets? Okay, quite a few people, okay. So have I. So there's a pub in Perth which serves crickets, and I was doing a media piece for this last year, and I figured if I'm going to be credible, I should go and try it myself. And yeah, good, I've done it once. So when we get to the workshop, later in the afternoon, one of the things I want you to do is share your ideas with the other people that you're working with. So you're going to be creating your own vision for the future, but I also want you to be sharing your ideas with other people. So that's the first area, about you taking the lead. The second one is about you involving everybody and more people. And actually this applies at 2 levels. So this applies to you with your CRC in your community, but it also applies to the network. There's a really strong network that I've already experienced this morning, and people sharing ideas. And let me ask you a question about 3 companies. So let me ask you, what do these 3 things have in common? Number 1 is Amazon Prime. So you know Amazon.com. Prime is their membership service, which costs about $100 a year. You get special deals, you get access to, you get free postage, you get access to sales before anyone else does. That's the first one. The second one's Gmail. Google's free email service has more than 1 billion users around the world. And the third one is McCafe, which is like McDonald's for breakfast. Okay, so what do you think those 3 things have in common? I'm going to give you 10 seconds, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk to the people next to you. What do you think those 3 things have in common? All right, thank you for doing that. What do they have in common? There's many things that they have in common. There's one specific thing that I'm looking for, but there's more than one right answer to this. What do they have in common? Worldwide. US-owned. Yeah, derivatives, like they're an offshoot of the parent company. Easy to use. Apps. There's one of the... What's that one? Yeah, they're all moving forward, right? They're advances. And so one thing that many people don't know is all of those 3... So what's another one? That all of those 3 things, those 3 business ideas, were suggested by employees. So they didn't come from management, these were employees. So Amazon Prime, they have an online suggestion box. Somebody said, why don't we create a membership service? It's now a multi-million-dollar business. Gmail, Google used to give their employees 1 day a week to work on whatever they wanted. Somebody invented Gmail. McCafe, a franchisee in Australia, in Melbourne actually, came up with the idea of McCafe, and now it's taken on all around the world. And in fact, this kind of dovetails with something that Nigel mentioned earlier, and it's something that Ralph mentioned earlier as well, that the best ideas don't necessarily come from the top of the organisation, and it's true in your community as well. The more you can involve people, the better the ideas you're going to get as a result of that. This guy here is the head of Google's global education. And he says that when he goes out and talks to school kids, and he says he never asks them, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, what problem do you want to solve? And I reckon that's a really good question that we should always be asking ourselves as well. What problems are we solving in our community? And the thing is, you don't need to solve every problem that everybody has. You don't need to do that. You just pick and choose the ones that you're best equipped to solve, and you solve them. It's just like for me, like we're coming up to summer, so I've started working with a personal trainer. This is the before version that you see, right? And so you know the way the personal trainers advertise? So they say things like, are you overweight? I can help you lose weight. You never see a personal trainer that goes, are you fat and ugly? Would you like to be just ugly? Okay. Okay, so you get to choose what problems you solve for people. And, I think you're really close to people in your community, so you probably know many of the problems. And we've had people up here saying, just have conversations, find out what problems people are solving. The one thing that's changed in the last few years is that the way you solve problems has changed. I feel a bit nervous putting up this slide. I feel like I'm going to start World War III, but let me ask the question. How many people here are iPhone users? Okay, quite a lot. How many people are Android users? Actually, it's not, so it's close to 50-50, and that's true in Australian groups whenever I ask the question. Around the world, there's just no competition, right? Google Android has 80% plus of the smartphone market, and Apple has about 15%, and there's a few other bits here and there. Okay, now we could argue for hours about why that's the case, but one of the reasons is the way that these two companies think about their community, their customers. So Apple's philosophy is this: we're really smart, we know what's best for you, right? And they create beautiful products, absolutely beautiful products. Google's philosophy is you're really smart, you know what's best for you. So the Android phones, they have a little bit more control from the users, from the app developers, even from the manufacturers, but they're a little bit more clunky. And sometimes they crash a bit more often. They're not as beautifully designed. But I reckon, forget about the Google versus Apple war. If you think about the future, we should be thinking about the Google philosophy with our customers and with our communities, especially here. So you go, you're really smart, you know what's best for you, and enable them to do that. So I talk a lot about people being customer-centric, and it's true, they're customer-centric, client-centric, community-centric, whatever you want to call it. People want to be involved in the products and the services that you provide for them. And the more that they get involved, the more they feel part of it. You know this. But also, sometimes you get great ideas from them, which you may never have got if you didn't ask. So I'm going to say, just ask more. Ask more questions to find out what problems you're really solving. There's a guy called Dan Ariely, and he talks about irrational behavior, but predictably rational. And he says this: if you get people to feel that something is theirs in their own unique way, then they will feel more connected to it. They'll feel more value from it. And you get great ideas as well. And now, not all the ideas are great, as you know, but you never know if you don't ask. So here's some interesting ideas. So this is a bit of an old photo, but you can see this guy here who's taking a photo of himself with his phone on the end of this big long dustpan, right? Now, of course, we call that selfie stick. Right? A monopod, if you want to sound smart. But that idea started from a book published in Japan in the 1990s. And this book was just these funny little gadgets that were created. In fact, the author of the book called it things which were not exactly useful, but somehow not altogether useless. This book is still available. It's 101 unuseless Japanese inventions. You can still download it on Kindle because it's worth looking at, because there's some great ideas like this one here. This one here, which is a hair visor. Yeah, sometimes I get some nervous laughs from people about that one. This is one of my favorites. This is so you can sleep on the way into work if you've got a long commute on the train or a bus or tram. Suction cup at the back, and so you can sleep standing up. And the note on the front is blurry and it's in Japanese, but it's your destination and a polite note to other passengers to wake you up when you get there, right? So some of these are crazy ideas, but You never know what ideas you're going to get if you don't ask. The other thing is just follow what's happening in the world, because whatever you provided yesterday or last year may not be relevant tomorrow and next year. And this can be really valuable when we do our planning session later. Netflix is a company that many of us know now. What does it do? Yeah, streaming movies, right? But it started off as a DVD rental company. And initially, Netflix was competing with Blockbuster, and they said, what are the things that people don't like? They don't like having to return their movies after they've watched them, and they don't like paying late fees. So Netflix said, we'll provide this reply paid service. You can order it online. The DVD arrives in the mail, but it comes with a reply paid envelope that you drop it back in when you're finished. And then people got better internet access and streaming was possible. Netflix, they didn't say, let's become a faster DVD delivery service. They said, let's completely switch our business model and go online. And the TV studios and movie studios loved them, because here's another way they could get license fees by licensing it to Netflix, until it became too much of a threat. And then they stopped licensing their material to Netflix. And Netflix said, oh, that's okay, we'll do our own movies. So they've now got one of the biggest lots in Hollywood where they create their own movies and TV shows, because they followed what was happening in the world. They didn't stick to what they were doing and just go a little bit better. They said, what do our customers need? And just be aware that, especially now, as a result of COVID-19, priorities have changed. So if you've stopped talking to your customers, and Deanne, I think you asked this question earlier about, how do you find out what people want? And it's good for you because you're new, so it's easier for you to go and ask customers because you don't have assumptions about what customers really want. I reckon there are a lot of people who've fallen into, we think we know what our community wants, but we may not know. It's worth continuing to have those conversations if you've stopped doing them. Okay, the third one, as I said, is to engage more deeply with the people who are already in your team. Whether they're part of the CRC, they're on the committee, they're volunteers, engage more deeply with them. There's some research done by Harvard, and they were looking at where do the best ideas come from. And so they did this experiment, and they said, let's look at carpenters. Pre-COVID, carpenters are supposed to wear safety masks when they work, and of course they are even now, but at the time it wasn't common to wear masks, but carpenters are supposed to wear them for safety. But many of them didn't do it. So these researchers were wondering, how can we encourage carpenters to wear their masks without standing over them and forcing them to do it? Because some of them thought it wasn't necessary, some of them thought, I'm too busy, some of them forgot, whatever reason. And so these researchers were looking for ideas to encourage them to wear their masks. So they asked 3 groups of people for their ideas. So first of all, they asked other carpenters. As you can imagine, what do you reckon your mates could do? How could we encourage your mates to wear their masks? Then they asked roofing contractors. They figured another tradie might have some ideas that would work for carpenters. Then they asked rollerbladers. So these are not people who make rollerblades, these are people who actually rollerblade. So of these 3 groups, which of them do you think had the best ideas for carpenter safety? Yeah, rollerbladers, right? Otherwise, this isn't much of a story, okay? So what they found was the further away you were from that area of expertise, the better ideas you had. And better doesn't mean they were just way out there better. They were actually more practical and more usable as well. And there were 2 reasons for that. And by the way, it wasn't because the rollerbladers are really creative and carpenters weren't. If you swap it around, and they tried the experiment the other way, and they found that carpenters had better ideas for rollerblader safety than the rollerbladers, right? So it works both ways. But there are 2 reasons why the rollerbladers had better ideas for carpenters. One is they came from a completely different background, so they said they had ideas which the carpenters had never thought of. The second reason was, as soon as they had an idea, they didn't go, oh, we tried that once and it didn't work, or our community won't like it, or so-and-so won't approve it, or we don't have money for it, or it's not a priority. They didn't filter the ideas as soon as they had them. They thought about the ideas first, and then they looked at how can we make this happen? And this is what's happening now in our age of access, that everyone in our communities has access to more information, expertise, and learning opportunities than ever before. And you just don't know what skills people have. This is a picture of me and my two little sisters and my little brother. This was quite a while ago, but a few years after we came to Australia. So we came to Australia in 1976. We were accepted for immigration in 1975. But before we could come here, we had to go through a whole bunch of interviews and paperwork and bureaucracy and stuff. And in that time, my mum bought us this little book about Australia, and she made us read it every day. So we learnt about Captain Cook and Burke and Wills, Ayers Rock as we used to call it then, because my mum said to us, when we get to the immigration interview, they're going to ask you lots of questions about Australia. And if you get any of them wrong, they won't let us in. Right? Now, I don't know whether she really thought that or whether she just wanted us to learn a bit more about the country where we spend the rest of our lives. She can't remember this story, but I remember it really clearly. Anyway, it didn't matter because we went to the Australian Embassy in Colombo, lined up with everybody else. The guy in front of us was asked, who was the first Prime Minister of Australia? And he said, I don't know. And the immigration guy goes, congratulations, mate, welcome to Australia. Right? The reason I'm sharing that with you is because one of the things that we learnt about, where's Rebecca? She's still here, was this. We learnt about the Royal Flying Doctor Service and the School of the Air. And for me, as an 8-year-old kid, I was amazed that here were these other 8-year-old kids like me with no school anywhere near them, and yet they could still get an education. Right? Now we call that remote learning, online learning, virtual learning, Zoom learning, but we invented it here almost 100 years ago. And it means that there are people who are now like lifelong learners, and we should all be lifelong learners, and we have access to so many learning opportunities that perhaps we didn't before. And I think it's really important, let me just show you this slide here. It's super important just to take advantage of some of the skills that you may not realize are in other people in your community. Does anyone recognize this? What is it? Pong, right? Yeah. So this is what computer games looked like when I was growing up. This is my stepson Josh. He's the one on the left. And he loves computer games, right? But this is what computer games look like now on his Xbox. And the thing is, there are a lot of people who are still Pong thinkers in an Xbox world. And the good thing is, we don't need to be Xbox thinkers because we've already got those thinkers in our community if we take advantage of them. And one of the traps in taking advantage of them is that you might find that some of them are challenging people to deal with. So another futurist, Chris Brogan, wrote this book, The Freaks Shall Inherit the Earth. And I won't do this survey. I won't ask you to put up your hand, but I reckon if I said who thinks they're a freak, I reckon there will be people who put up their hand because it's not something to be ashamed of anymore. So it's people like this, Rajiv. He's not this billionaire business owner who decided to take on the Australian retail sector. He's just a bloke with 3 mates and a modem who saw a chance to do something different. And the thing is, there are lots of examples in history of people who didn't see the talent sitting right in front of them. For example, this one here, you ought to go back to driving a truck, was said by a talent scout to Elvis Presley. We don't like their sound, guitar music's on the way out. Who was that about? Does anyone know? The Beatles? Yep. Thank you. Can't act, can't sing, can dance a little. Does anyone know? Yeah, Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire, that's right. The last time I showed this, somebody said Shane Warne. And doesn't matter what he does, he will never amount to anything, was said by somebody who taught Albert Einstein, right? So how do you avoid making these mistakes with the people in your communities and the skills that they've got? My very first job out of uni, I was working as a software developer for this little company in Perth, and I remember one time, so I like this, like one time I had this business card that said Gihan Perera, head programmer, and I kind of like that. I still use it. I like to think that I'm still programming people's heads, right? But at the time, I was in charge of the software development team. My mate, Pete Robinson, was in charge of the quality assurance and testing team. And even though we were mates, at times it felt like we were mortal enemies. Because software development at the time worked like this. We'd work for months on this software, give it to Peter's team for the final testing, and then we thought it was perfect, but they'd send it back to us 2 days later with a big list of problems, what we call bugs. So we used to play this game called It's Not a Bug, It's a Feature. Right? So whatever they'd send us, we'd try and figure out how we could justify that that's the way the software was supposed to work. So if they go, oh, it crashes every hour, we'd go, oh yeah, that's not a bug, it's a feature. It means that people can stand up and walk around and have a break while the computer's rebooting ourselves, right? So we didn't always win the game, but it taught me something that's really useful about not just software, but about people. So you might see people in your community and you may think that they've got like certain... By the way, if they're sitting next to you, don't nudge them, right? But could you go, he's not arrogant, he's confident. She's not pushy, she's determined. He's not lazy, he conserves energy. She's not blunt, she's refreshingly honest. Give you one more. He's not irrationally psychotic, he's lovably quirky. All right? So, are you taking advantage of the skills and talents of the people in your organisation and the people in your community as well? Because they're the freaks who might be the leaders of the future with the best ideas. So we talked about these three things. We talked about taking the lead. We talked about you reaching wider to the community and engaging more deeply with the people in your team. So I'm going to be back and we're going to do a little workshop around this to plan for the future. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's about this, to expect the unexpected. So a couple of things to finish with. One is two quotations from two of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century. Albert Einstein said this: imagination is more important than knowledge. And boxer Mike Tyson said this: everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And people think there's nothing you can do in making plans because something else is going to come along and punch us in the face. And it's just not true. You can make plans if you do it the right way. And we'll talk about that soon. I shared ideas like this with thousands of people. And I reckon in any room, actually the research shows that in any room, 1 in 3 people will take the ideas away and put them into action. So have a look at the person on your left, the person on your right. If they look like unmotivated slobs, you're in luck. So I want to finish by saying I want you to be one of these people that says, I matter. And I want to finish with a bit of music. I've got 5 questions for you about this music. Let me play a little bit of it first. Oh, some people know the answers already. Okay, so 5 questions for you about this. Number 1, an easy one. What is it? Does anyone recognize it? Pachelbel's canon. Yes, it is. The canon in D major for 3 violins and bass, but for today I'll accept Pachelbel's canon. Question 2, kind of answered already. So who composed it? It was Johann Pachelbel, a German composer. Can you just turn down a little bit, please, Dylan? Thanks. Question 3 is a little bit harder. When was it written? Yeah, it's not bad. So it's about 300 years ago. And question 4, what else did Pachelbel write? I was surprised to find that he was prolific when I did my research. He wrote a lot of music, and most of it's forgotten unless you're a serious scholar of classical music. But every day he touches the hearts and lives and souls of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Here's my question 5 for you. How will people remember you 300 years from now? If you really embrace this idea that I matter, decide for whom you'll matter. Your family, your community, wider than that. And for how long will you matter? Today? Tomorrow? The rest of your life? Maybe 300 years from now.
had a mic that I could drop, I would. But thank you very much, Gihan. I was supposed to be taking notes so I can sum up at the end of the day, but my jaw was just dropping further and further. Oh my gosh, yes, amazing. Thank you very much, Gihan. I'm really looking forward to this afternoon's workshop. So we have we've now got a presentation between now and the workshop. And up next we have Rob Cossart, CEO of the Wheatbelt Development Commission. Rob is going to provide a snapshot about the journey of the CRCs, how we've evolved with the changing demographics and economies of the regions, examples of innovations that CRCs have led, what we've learnt, and what we can do to leverage the opportunity that are the CRCs and the CRC network. So I think that's a really wonderful segue into, taking what we've heard from Gihan in a kind of out there, ethereal, what's possible world, and making it more contextualised for the Wheatbelt and for indeed the state. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the welcome to country this morning by Deborah. It was very touching, but also acknowledged the traditional owners of land we're meeting on today, the Ballandong people, the elders past and present, but also acknowledge the traditional owners of land that we all work on right across regional Western Australia. Also like to acknowledge that we had Minister McTiernan here this morning. It was really good getting her insights around the CRC network, and this afternoon we've got the Honourable Darren West, so thanks for being able to attend, Darren. I think it's been really insightful to hear the presentations and discussions so far today around not only the future of regional WA, but the opportunities for CRCs and how they can function within that landscape. I guess when you talk about CRCs, the Wheatbelt's always quite topical within that. They are a big part of Wheatbelt communities. And as such, it's actually quite exciting to have this conference in Northam for many reasons. One, I think it's very topical to the CRC network, but the ability to have 130 people visiting Northam and filling up our hotels is also a good thing when it comes to the regional economy. I recently moved to the Wheatbelt. I've been here for about 6 months now. Started with the Wheatbelt Development Commission back on the 23rd of March, so walked straight into the mighty world of COVID. And that's going to give a little bit of an interesting insight as to my perceptions about the Wheatbelt and particularly about the role of the CRCs within that. And I've relocated from the Kimberley, where I was for about 12 years. What's really struck me about the Wheatbelt is that strong sense of community. But what's, I think, something which surprised me, because I expected that, was that really strong sense of innovation that exists across the community and the economic sectors. And it's been something which has been really at the forefront of my thinking over the last 6 months. So today I want to talk about my reflections over the past 6 months, what I see as the opportunities for the CRCs, how we can build upon that strong sense of community and community connection and utilise the CRC network to support economic development and diversification at the community and regional level. Look, I'll start off by giving a little bit of context to the Wheatbelt economy for those that aren't from the Wheatbelt. And I think this is good to understand where we are. We have a population of about 73,000 people, and being the third most populous region in WA, but it's really, really dispersed. And I think this is where the CRC and the value of the CRCs come into that conversation. We have an economy that's one of the most stable in WA, with a gross regional productivity of about $7.06 billion in 2019 and really, really low unemployment. Our population has remained really stable over the past 20 years, but what we have seen is a change in our demographics with about 10% increase in people over age 65. Small businesses really are the backbone of the Wheatbelt economy. And we've got about 9,500 small businesses, and that's grown by about 18% over the last 5 years. And that role of small business and the role that the CRC network can play in that economic space is quite critical. We're obviously well known for our agricultural productivity, representing about 27% of WA's agricultural economic output, but it's more than just grains and barley and wheat. I'll just rattle off a few. 83% of WA's oranges, just thought I'd bring that in there, Liz. 80% of WA's lemons and 60% of WA's lettuces. So it really is a really interesting agricultural sector. What's also important is tourism, and we'll talk a little bit about that and the role of CRCs in that space. But one of the points which has become evident today is the important rate of volunteering. I think it's actually the highest rate of volunteering in WA is actually within the Wheatbelt. But the most important fact of all that is we have 41 CRCs representing one of the broadest geographic footprints in terms of DPIRD's investment as a funding partner across the Wheatbelt, and that represents about 40% of the state's total. So my real question is, how can we mobilise and partner with that? And there's been some interesting conversation today about that connection between the commissions and the CRCs. I won't hang on this slide for too long, given it's been talked a little bit about today in terms of that changing and varying roles of the CRCs. But I guess I do want to acknowledge those really strong partnerships that exist between the CRCs, local governments, and the role that the CRCs play as a key hub in many regional towns, never more so across the Wheatbelt, and I heard those comments today. I guess one of the points which really comes to me is we talk about those varying roles. I just want to go back to an earlier point. We talked a lot about the perception of CRCs, and for a new person coming into the Wheatbelt, I asked a lot of questions about the CRC network. What do they do? How do they function? Where are they? What's our relationships between the Commission and the CRC? So welcome some of those comments that were made earlier. But it really has come down to what's our perception? How are we viewed? And how do we structure those relationships? So we were very privileged a couple of months ago. We actually had the Honourable Kim Beazley, the Governor of Western Australia, and he visited the Wheatbelt, and we had him at Beverley, and he went into the Beverley CRC, and it was really good to be able to have that conversation about the CRC network and the Beverley CRC and what it was doing, and it was a great conversation that we were there. And that, I guess, really brought to me the role of the CRCs around the Wheatbelt communities, and it was able to see that there's the childcare in there, there's the town library, they had offices, hot desk offices for a range of businesses that were starting up in town. There were also the tourism centre. So that, in addition to the role that the CRCs played in the context of COVID, has actually really brought them to the fore of my mind, going, what's our partnership role and what can we do? But more importantly, what can we do in that economic sense? Now, not taking away the important community services that are the absolute backbone of CRCs, but as a Development Commissioner, I'm sitting there going, how can we partner with the CRCs more in that economic development space? As I've highlighted, the CRCs are in a very unique position because of that broad geographic footprint, and how do we optimise that footprint and partner with it? So, as I said, as a CEO of the Commission, I'm really looking at how can we build upon that and how can we work with DPIRD and the CRCs to maximise that community connection, capacity and knowledge. So, as I go through this talk, I want to pose a few questions on each slide, which will probably lead into that next session, but really reflecting on how the CRCs have grown, adapted and matured over the last 30 years. What are the opportunities for CRCs in the future? And I'll ask you to take a little bit of an economic development lens to that thinking as I go through my talk. And how can we build upon that broad geographic footprint and that connection right across the community, that strong sense of community connection which has been so prevalent in the conversation today, and that local knowledge, and how can we connect that into grassroots economic development and support for economic initiatives? So this leads to me one of the great questions that I've been trying to get my head around as CEO of the Commission. How do we balance that need of the community, the region, and the state? I think we've heard lots today about how that community role is so critical and so well done. We've heard some really good stories about the role of supporting the state, and particularly on the back of COVID. We've also heard about in terms of services that are delivered in partnerships with Department of Health and other agencies. And then we've also heard some really interesting insights about that region. So to me, there is an opportunity here. And I guess in many cases it's happening, and that's a really positive thing. Yeah, so look, I guess what I'm really focusing on is how do we build upon that strength? And I had a recent email exchange and some conversation with the Queriting CRC and hearing some of the really exciting things that they're doing, particularly in the economic space, and their desire to do more from that. And they've they formed a really productive partnership with the Wheatbelt Business Network, which they've been doing some good work on. So they've been talking about things like their business breakfast, their business after hours, their social media marketing, and also they've been doing some work with their local government around their economic development strategies with a particular focus on tourism. What I was really excited about today was the presentation by the Ravensthorpe CRC and hearing about what they've been doing, particularly around that regional network and partnering with those other CRCs. And that's actually a point which Chris Starcevich, the CEO of the Goldfields Esperance Development Commission, had flagged with me, was a really a great story about what's going on. So I guess I'll pose a few questions in the context of supporting economic development and balancing the needs of the community, the region, at the state. And that's how can we utilise the CRC network to support job creation, economic diversification in regional WA? And also, how can we utilise the CRC network to attract residents and businesses to regional WA? And there's been a lot of questions come up the panel today about engagement and models and funding, but I'm actually going to try and turn this back to the people of the CRCs and go, well, how do you think we could do that better? How can you give us some guidance on that? Because I actually agree with many of the points which have been raised. The best ideas around how do we support our economy and our communities and our job creation will actually come from the people who are very well connected to their communities at a grassroots level, and will hear lots of innovative ideas on a daily basis. What I want to see is how do we get that better connection into our thinking as a commission? And I note that there was a question raised earlier about how do we actually link that into the strategic plans and the conversations of the commission. So I'd love to have that conversation with that person later on as well. Innovation and diversification in the Wheatbelt. This is probably one of my favourite points at the moment because, coming to the Wheatbelt, I've been absolutely amazed at the sheer amount of innovation that there is across the Wheatbelt community. And we've got the regional economic development grants, and these have actually been, it's been really interesting to look and reflect on the projects and understand what we've funded. And there's a range of things up here. We've got everything from stargazing to Kochi to Wage and Duck to a whole range of businesses that have been innovative in the Wheatbelt and diversified from what they've been doing. And I was really lucky to recently attend the AgriStart Innovation Forum, where there was a number of Wheatbelt businesses who were really profiled in the room, and they were taking what was a thought idea and how they transforming that into something more. So establishing businesses in a regional location is challenging. It's challenging on a good day. It's always going to be hard, but I'd like to think that we all have a role to play, particularly the CRC network, in how we pull that together. So I'll ask another question to the group. What's the role of CRCs in supporting innovation and diversification across regional WA? And is it about attracting, do they have a role in attracting new businesses to towns and supporting existing businesses to expand? It could be anything to providing a hot desk venue for people that want to be able to go in there, sit down and work through some of those business opportunities. It could be the partnerships with the Chambers of Commerce that we've heard about today. It could be business support programs that I've heard about from some of the CRCs and ones that are really actively wanting to do more in that space. And it could be those local economic development strategies. But the key point for me is there's an opportunity to partner with regionally based organisations to achieve that. It doesn't just have to be the Chambers of Commerce, it could be organisations, as I said, like AgriStart, it could be a local government, it could be the Development Commission. So one of my questions then is, how could your CRC support innovation diversification, and what ideas or connections do you have to those businesses that you could help focus in to government and partly being the Commission? Creating regional networks. There's been quite a bit of talk about this today, and I think it's one of the really key ones for me is how do we actually create networks but not force networks? So how do we do this in an organic and natural way? And if we look at across the Wheatbelt, 42 local governments, it's very, very hard for me as a CEO to engage with those 42 local governments and get clarity on what those guys are saying. But local governments, to a degree, have actually done quite well in forming up into their local government zones, working at their regional operating councils, their ROCs, and getting some commonality about issues, opportunities, and leveraging those strengths. We've seen the same thing around around networks, whether it's in the aged care sector, where we've seen SIACA come together and look at how's that as an organisation working across, I think it's about half a dozen local government areas, which creates a really clear vehicle for government to engage with and also for the Commission to engage with. So I guess I have a really big focus, and I'd love to be able to explore this later on today with people. How can we create regional networks out of the CRCs? And the focus of that is, how do we identify synergies, maximise our resources, improve our service delivery and increase coordination? Because it won't be a case of working at a Wheatbelt level. I can't even see we're going to work at the level which the Commission does in terms of its 5 zones, but we could. But where there's a natural synergy and a natural tendency to work together, that's what I'd really like to explore with the CRCs, and I think that's why I was really taken by the conversation this morning about Ravensthorpe as well. One example which has worked really well at a regional level around economic development has been the network that's been created up the Central Coast, the Northern Growth Alliance. And what we saw there was 3 shires, and it's the Shire Dandaragan, Chittering and Gingin, that all had a common set of questions and a common set of issues around agricultural development and primary industries. And those guys came together, joined up as a group, partnered with the Commission, have got a lot of clarity in terms of what are the issues they're facing, how do they want to address them, how are they going to maximise their resources, and how do they leverage that and get a really clear message into the state. So that's actually been a really successful collaboration and a really natural, organic networking that's taken place. So once again, I'll ask the question, what regional network would best support your CRC? And we've heard a lot of that conversation today, but if there is an aggregation of CRCs that are coming together to have that conversation, please reach out to whether it's DPIRD, whether it's your Regional Development Commission or whether it's local government, and get them to come into that, because it makes it a lot easier for us to work and to get progress and opportunity around that aggregation when it's a naturally organic forming and it has the best of intentions. Opportunities for CRCs and economic development, and this is sort of summarising a lot of points which have already been raised today. Conduit for local procurement. How can we get better connection between businesses across the Wheatbelt and the government expenditure? I think there's $54 million a year of state government funding. Only about 7% of that goes to local businesses. So we want to increase that. We've got a local procurement officer. How do we reach in and partner with the CRCs and work with the CRCs to maximise that? We've talked about innovation. We've had a lot of conversation today about supporting labour attraction. At the moment, it's a big focus of government. There's a role that the commissions and government can partner with the CRCs around that labour attraction. Promote opportunities in the Wheatbelt. There's no better organisation and community network to actually promote the Wheatbelt than the CRCs. How do we actually step into that space and do it in a very outward focus? Moving to the Wheatbelt is probably one of the things that I commented very earlier was we don't sell the Wheatbelt well enough. How do we do that? I think the CRCs can be a key part of that. What are the opportunities? Identify opportunities for your CRC. What are they? I'd be really keen to understand that. There's been a lot of questions to the panel today. What opportunities in your region? Is it to support small business startups? Is it a hub for innovation? What are the needs of your region? Is it to connect regional businesses together? Is it about partnering with the chambers of commerce? Is it a linkage? Is it linking local businesses to state government and local government procurement? But not every CRC needs to be the same. And I think that's one of my points across the Wheatbelt is how do we collaborate to maximise the value proposition that exists? How do we collaborate to really bring that into focus? And there's been a little bit of talk today about governance. And is there an opportunity to actually partner up and have a sub-regional level governance? If you've got that half a dozen or four CRCs, can they come together and develop up that common plan, strategic plan, business plan? Can they bring their governance together? I'm not saying that has to be the way it rolls, but there's opportunities about this that how can we identify those opportunities to get more efficient and take on new opportunities? My second last slide is maximising the skills network, and I appreciate that it was raised in that last one. I've been really taken back by the sheer skills matrix that exists across the CRC network. We've got auditors, we've got accountants, we've got graphic designers, we've got people with a legal background, we've got successful small business people. how do we harness that skill set? Because that's a skill set that's really needed, particularly in emerging small businesses across the Wheatbelt. So how can the CRC network capture those skills and partner? But also, how do we harness the really underutilised skills that do exist across our regions? So my questions to the group: what skills do you have in your CRC? What underutilised skills do you have in your region? And can we start sharing those skills across to maximise the opportunities in the context of economic development? Setting up for success. Very last slide. Really what I'm asking for this group, and I think there's a real opportunity, I'd like to be part of that conversation with everyone, and Nigel and I are talking about how does the Commission partner with DPERT about how do we work with the CRCs moving forward. But most of all, we need to be responsive to change, and that's been a key theme today. But whether it's government, whether it's the community expectations or requirements, whether that's economic opportunities or whether that's technological advances, really explore new opportunities and future roles for your CRC. And I think the point that Liz made earlier, lean into that uncomfortableness, take that on, challenge yourself on what you could be. Establish a regional network to maximise your opportunities, leverage off your skills and build upon your regional advantages. And that's a really key one for me. Challenge yourself to think outside the box for opportunities. But most of all, there's no better time than now to support regional economic development, particularly with the focus of government around job creation and economic diversification. So, thank you.
You're stuck. There we are. Thanks very much, Rob. What I particularly like about that presentation is that it was kind of really putting the tangible examples about what's possible and what's already been achieved. And I think transforming that kind of asset-based community development into those real driving economic development activities, businesses and whatnot. And I really love the questions you posed. I think they're really great questions to lead into the session this afternoon. So thanks very much for that, Rob. If you weren't excited before about Gihan's presentation, the workshop's going to be amazing. So now, the best part, we get to harvest all those gems we've heard today and get to put them into action and get to put them into a meaningful and contextual vision for each of our CRCs and communities. And before I do invite Gihan back, and I'm just going to drop him in it because he's this kind of character that I can. So Darren, we've had everyone stand up and wave to introduce themselves. So I would like to formally, we've had the Minister step out and head back to Perth, and we've had her tag team with the Honourable Darren West MLC, so you're going to have to stand up and do a dance. So Darren's going to be with us for the rest of the day and for the networking this evening. Yes, there we are, fantastic. Actually, I actually made reference to, and I think I'm going to get this right, Darren, so throw something at me later. So I made reference to the Minister and her role in the Highway to Hell, but you're a musician yourself. He's a bit of a rock star himself. So prior to politics, he was a rock star as well. So we had a whole stage of rock stars. Right, Gihan, I'm now going to welcome you back, and we're going to have our workshop this afternoon, and I'll touch back at the end of the day. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Liz. It's been a great day. It's been a great day so far, and it's not over yet. And what we're going to do today is kind of change the energy up, and it's very much about you individually. I kind of got the feeling that this is quite a shy and retiring group. So just to get us started, what we're going to do is we're going to break up into separate rooms. You'll get the chance to work on your plan. I'll give you some guidance around that. But before we do that, I'd like you to have a chat with the person next to you. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this. So have a chat with the person next to you and share what you think the best thing that you have done in your CRC in the last 18 to 24 months. What's the best thing that you have done that's worked the best for you? So have a chat now. I've told you a bit about me already, but one of the things I haven't told you is that I'm a cricket tragic. Right, so as in, I love watching cricket. I tried playing cricket. I was never very good at it. My nephew Riley, he's very good at cricket. So he plays for the WA. He's just been selected in the WA under-17 team that's going to play in the national competition. So he's very good. But I've always been I love cricket, but I've never been good at it. But I remember as a kid growing up here in Perth, in Western Australia, always listening to ABC radio. The Sheffield Shield was on, the test matches are on, and I loved it on the weekend, listening to ABC radio. And one of the things which was kind of new to me was that quite often during summer, during hot summer days, the ABC radio broadcast was broken up, was interrupted by fire alerts and bushfire warnings. And it's quite intriguing to me because I'd never come across anything like that before. And it would start off with, there's a bushfire warning, there's a fire warning for this area, and if you can and you want to leave, get out now. And then the cricket would continue, and then an hour later the next warning would come along and say, oh, this road, this highway is closed, so if you want to leave, you now have to go this way. And then an hour later, 45 minutes later, there'd be the next warning, that the next announcement that said, it's now too late to leave, be prepared to stay and defend your home. And I always used to think, oh my God, who are these brave people who would choose to stay and defend their home? And I'm sure you know some people like that. You might have done that yourself. And I just realized that, I had no idea how to do it because I had no knowledge of the preparation that was required. And yet there were these people who chose to do it, who chose to stay and defend their home because they knew what was required to make that work. I would have been in a complete disaster situation if I had to do it, but because they knew what to do. And there's so many things that are changing our world now, and the better prepared we are for it, the more likely we are that we can stay and defend our homes, look after our communities, and be ready for the future. So that's what this session's about. It's about going from many of the ideas that you've heard today, creating a plan for them, and then taking some action. We're not going to create a full plan, but I'm going to help you create a vision for this. And there are 3 things that I want to share with you today before we break out into the group. So just to give you some idea of what you're doing. And as Liz said, this is about you individually thinking about, from everything you've heard today, getting ideas from other people, but individually creating your vision for your CRC for like two time frames. So one is ready for 2022, which is where the current contracts go, or also looking ahead for the 5 years beyond that. And because there's a lot of change, and you may have done planning before, I want to share with you some ideas that research shows will help you plan and progress for the future and create strong plans even when things come along and punch you in the face. And so there's some research that's been done by this woman called Dr. Heidi Grant Halverson. She's a social psychologist, and she's gathered all this research that she and some other researchers have done about how to succeed in a world that's changing really quickly. So the first thing is, and the biggest thing I want you to come away from this workshop is what do you see for your future? So the way we're going to run this is we're going to go off the 3 meeting rooms out there. We'll direct you to them soon. And what you're going to do is write down for yourself what your future is going to look like. As I said, 2 years from now, and then 5 years after that. What do you see for your future? And there's one thing I suggest you do. The trap that a lot of people fall into is when the future is uncertain, they only create very short-term plans because you only create stuff for what you know. And you think, oh, I don't know what's going to happen COVID-wise, travel-wise, funding-wise, and so they only create what they can see. And I'd like you to think beyond that. So one of the pieces of research that Dr. Grant Halverson and her team did was they looked at a group of women who were doing this fitness program. They were about to do this fitness program. They surveyed them at the start, and then they surveyed them at the end. And so a couple of questions they asked was, do you think that you will succeed at this program or not? Some people said yes, they thought they would. Some thought no. And the other one, do you think it'll be easy or do you think it'll be difficult? And then they had a look at the end at the women who succeeded, who actually achieved their goals. And I won't even ask you to put up your hands because I think you know the answer. The ones who actually succeeded were the ones who thought that they would succeed and didn't think that it would be easy. Right? They thought it would be challenging along the way. So the researchers call this being a realistic optimist. So absolutely, I want you to set some stretch goals and be optimistic about it, but also understand that there's going to be some obstacles along the way. So don't let uncertainty get in the way of you setting a big goal. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, that the first thing is around is like seeing what's coming up in the future. The second thing is, actually, I've used the word stop here, but let me tell you about another study that was done in social psychology. This is called the Good Samaritan study. Has anyone come across this? Okay, a couple of people. Okay, so here's how it works. So what these researchers did was they went to a seminary where they trained priests. So here were a whole bunch of priests who were studying to become priests, or people who were studying to become priests. And at this university, at this seminary, what they did was they set up this little experiment where these students were going from one lecture to the next, and along the way, there was an actor who'd fallen over, was kind of moaning and groaning and needed help. And they wanted to see whether these students who were traveling from one lecture to the next would stop and help them. Right, so if you know the Christian Bible, you know the story of the Good Samaritan, so they kind of set up this experiment. And they did it under different circumstances. So one is they said, we'll in the first lecture, we'll tell them the Good Samaritan story and we'll do an analysis of it before they go on to the next one. They had other situations, and they thought, what will make people stop? So what do you think was the thing that was most likely to make people stop and help them? It wasn't that they'd just heard the Good Samaritan story. Okay, what else do you think might have made them stop? Someone else stopped first.
Recognition.
What does recognition mean?
Well, getting an accolade for...
Yeah, okay, so they were rewarded for it, or recognition, yep. What else? Empathy, so the people who are more empathetic were likely to. What else? They knew the person, yeah. Actually, in this case, they didn't, because it was just some actor who was pretending to be like he was a complete stranger. So the thing that actually made the biggest difference was whether they were in a rush or not. Yeah. So if they didn't have much time to get to the next lecture, regardless of anything else, they were less likely to stop. So here's my thing for you, that when you set up your plans, what I'd also like you to do is figure out what are you going to not do? What are you going to stop doing? Okay, because it's very easy to add more and more things to your plate of things to do, but what are you going to stop doing? Now, it doesn't mean that thing doesn't get done. It might mean that this is something that I'm now going to get somebody else in my team to do. It might be something that will pass on to volunteers. It may be that I'm going to train somebody else to do it, or it might turn out that we don't need to do it at all. Okay, so first, the big thing is what you see. The other thing is what you're going to stop doing. And the last one is actually getting stuff done. And we use the word say here. Let me tell you about this other psychological experiment. This is called the Christmas experiment. And what they did with this one was they had, this is the university in Germany. And, in the Northern Hemisphere, the university year runs differently. So they don't end at the end of the year. They stop over Christmas, but then they come back after Christmas. So what this lecturer did was he said to his students, if you would like to get extra marks for this course, when you go on your Christmas break, I'd like you to write an essay about what you did at Christmas. And then email it to me before the end of the year, so before New Year's Eve. And so that was it. That was the instructions. If you want to get extra marks, do this. But he split the group into two, and half of them, that's exactly what he told them. The other half, he gave them one tiny extra instruction. He said, imagine now when you're going to be writing that essay. Okay, because here are these uni students going off on Christmas holiday. They're not thinking about uni at all, but he said to them, imagine when you're going to do it. It doesn't mean that they had to write it down. They didn't have to program it into their phone or put it into their calendar. They just had to imagine it. And yet those people were more than twice as likely to actually get things done. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, and what the researchers say, is the stuff that you actually put into your calendar, or you create deadlines, or you make time for, are more likely to get done. Right? So if you put something in your calendar, you're more likely to do it. Now you might go, well, duh, right? But if you look at most people's calendars, they're actually full of other people's goals. Right? Most people don't make time for their own goals in their calendar. And what I'd like you to do is something very specific as part of this workshop. So you create your plan, what do you see in your future? You decide what you're going to stop doing, and then what are you going to say tomorrow, next week, when you get back into communities, what are you going to say and who are you going to say it to? So what's a conversation that's going to start this process? Do you get that? So we're going to go from very big, which is what's our vision for the future. So we're going to go, what do we see our future going to be? What are we going to stop doing that allows us to get there? And then what conversation are we going to have when we get back into our communities? Most of the time in the workshop is going to be spent on this first area. Okay, so the way we'll run this is we've got the 3 meeting rooms set aside, so don't get up just yet, but what we'll do is we'll ask you to go out the front door there, the back door there, turn left, and the 3 meeting rooms on the left. They're kind of directly behind us. And each of the meeting rooms, you'll see that there are tables that are set up appropriately physical distanced, but each table has space for 6 people. So sit down at a table with 5 others. Who's come here with somebody else? Yeah, okay, so if you've come with somebody else, sit down with them. So have them at the same table, so you're working on your plan together, you work on your vision together. If you don't like the other people at your table, move. Feel free to do that. Okay, apart from that, it doesn't matter which table you're sitting at. And what I'd like you to do are these 3 things, right? So you're going to spend most of your time working on your vision for the future, and the other people at your table are going to be a sounding board for that. Okay, and what I'd like you to do is say, what is our world, our CRC world, going to look like 2 years from now and maybe 7 years from now, if you're brave to go up into that 5 years after that. Okay, so most of the time it's going to be doing that, getting ideas from other people at your table. As I said earlier, be that possibility thinker, and when you're a sounding board for other people, rather than creating obstacles for them, actually help build on their ideas. Okay, but the idea is that you're creating it for yourself. You're not trying to create something for the whole table. Each individual CRC here is going to create their own vision, but you're going to get help from other people. So those are 3 things. How do you see your future? What will you stop doing? And what will you say next? What's the next conversation you're going to have? There's one last thing I'd like you to do, as just to get your creative juices flowing. At the end of the session, what you'll find on your tables is there's this kind of flip chart paper and some coloured textures. What I'd like you to do is create a magazine cover for your table. Oh, there's a magazine cover, all right? So, and what the magazine is imagine in 2 years' time that there's a magazine featuring all the CRCs at your table, and each of them has a headline on the magazine cover. So you could put whatever artwork you want on the cover. It doesn't have to be my face. It could be anything you want. And some headlines. If you get to, say, the end of 2022, and there's a magazine published for that table, what are the 5 or 6 headlines that are going to be on that cover? Okay, so these are the achievements that you've made at the end of 2022, or it could be 2027. Okay, and they're going to be quite different. And then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll have afternoon tea. Will be served at the end of this. We'll stick up the magazines on the wall, either inside or outside here, and you can grab your afternoon tea and wander around and see what other people have said as their vision for the future. Okay, is everyone clear about the goal of what you're going for? It's about you, maybe somebody else, 2 people. It's about you, not necessarily a vision for the network. It's about a vision for you. It's about you knowing what you're going to let go, and it's about you knowing what conversation you're going to take back into your communities tomorrow or the day after or next week. Okay?
Welcome to the West Arthur CRC in Darkin. The West Arthur CRC team works on developing a vibrant and sustainable West Arthur community. We do this by providing opportunities to engage, inform, and build personal, business, and community capacity. During COVID-19 shutdown, the CRC's role in community connectedness was more important than ever. Thanks to an extension funded by a bequest, The Shire building we occupy is now a fantastic space to deliver our services. Thanks, Mr Hawthorne. We operate a Bendigo Bank agency, and among a lot of other things, for the Shire of West Arthur, we manage their medical services and their library, as well as the wonderful new Betty Brown Historical Centre. The essence of our CRC is good stakeholder engagement to ensure relevance, cooperative working relationships with local shire, school, service and community groups and neighbouring CRCs, and of course the commitment of a wonderful committee.
And my name is Rebecca and I'm the coordinator of Temple CRC, which is located in the amazing Great Southern. We are super excited and honoured to be celebrating 25 years of continuing and evolving service to the Broomhill Temple Shire to meet the needs of the rural community. Business and social development form an essential approach to our work. We deliver WA State Library services on behalf of the Shire, as well as producing a local community newsletter called Topics, providing a Centrelink access point and a school holiday activity program. Our purpose is to provide a relevant service which stimulate the creative use of telecommunication and computer technology for education and training. Our volunteers contribute to our richness and are the backbone of our organisation. Monthly interagency meetings with the key stakeholders contribute to the wealth of our vision to form new relationships, enhance positive life and business outcome. We are privileged to be a part of such a unique network when united can be a strong pillar to the rural community of WA. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Gaynor Lindsay, the coordinator of the Lehman Greenhead CRC. Our CRC actively serves the people of Lehman and Greenhead and surrounding communities by providing services that contribute to the future development of sustainable facilities in the community. We pride ourselves on adapting to the community needs. Having around 65% of seniors in our community's population, in November 2018 we commenced the journey of bringing our seniors into the digital world. We run fortnightly computer sessions with over 300 attending since its inception. Sustainability for our communities is promoted through the CRC administered community recycling yard, which also provides meaningful and fulfilling employment to our senior volunteers. Weekend workshops are hosted based on recycling, reusing and upcycling. We host community events, forums, workshops relevant to the needs of our community, as well as all the services that are available on a day-to-day basis.
Hello, it's Karina here from the Hopeton CRC. I hope you're all having a fantastic time at the conference. At the Hopeton CRC, we provide vital services for our community to keep our community vibrant, healthy and relevant. We strive to support and engage with all demographics of our community. Our activities have a strong focus on the environment. Living in a really lovely coastal community and also within the only UNESCO Biosphere Reserve in WA makes the environment at the forefront of what we do. Some of our 2020 highlights have been our colour run in February, where we focused on inclusion for all ages and abilities. And more recently, our National Science Week events, which concluded with an amazing exhibition of marine-inspired art made from recycled materials. We love being a part of the CRC network and we're really proud of the contribution that we make to our community.
Right, so I've had the, pleasure but also unenviable task of trying to collate all of our thoughts from today into a coherent message, which there was actually some really great quotables today that if I was a bit more active and on Twitter, I think that, actively lurking, still getting me. That's still my favourite part of today. So, a quick summary of kind of how the day has tracked. We started really big picture. And the whole day we've kind of been imagining what's possible in a futuristic sense, in a regional sense, what's possible for the CRC network, what's possible for the CRCs individually. So we've started on this really big, kind of big picture journey and narrowed it down. And the whole craft of the day has been to go on that journey and kind of get us to be a bit uncomfortable, lean into that discomfort, hear from other CRCs about what's been working, hear from our regional leaders about what they've seen are some of the opportunities, but also some of the, I guess, the uniqueness of our regions. So a couple of things that kind of stood out for me today as kind of key messages, I guess, was really I know the CRCs and I know the value that they bring to communities, but I don't think I'd really truly understood the assets that really these CRCs harness. And then also, I guess, the assets that CRCs harness, but also utilise as a comparative advantage. And I think one of the quotables that I'll take from today is that Walpole being the centre of the universe between the South and the North Pole. I thought that was a wonderful kind of quotable. And I guess in the context of comparative advantages is that really developing, like understanding, tapping into, and Nigel mentioned it around understanding your truth, tapping into what it is at the core, what makes your communities tick, so you can develop services and activities that are really truly relevant, not what you think are relevant, but are actually needed. Unsurprisingly, the other thing, as a self-confessed chronic volunteer, unsurprisingly, volunteers were a really key theme of today, and just how much we do depend on, lean upon, how volunteers can be the best thing since sliced bread. But again, another quotable from today: sometimes you can have too many volunteers, too many chiefs and not enough Indians, or too many Indians in that regard. And then also a couple of kind of strategies on how it is that we can, and as a chronic volunteer, I've certainly had volunteer burnout over the years, and I think some strategies about how it is that we can really mitigate that risk. And there were some really great processes today that were discussed around how that can be done. And then also engaging, even beyond that kind of the usuals that stick their hand up. There were some really great strategies around how it is that we can engage with stakeholders proactively, actively, and in an ongoing way. And I think that whole, there was some really great, robust discussion today about partnerships and what that could look like. Some perhaps unusual partnerships that haven't been there in the past, but doesn't mean that they can't be there in the future. One thing that Kitty with the prawn said, community is business and business is community. That really resonated strongly with me today, how embedded both of those things are, or both of those elements of community are. Often we do think them think of those two elements as quite as distinct from each other. But, you look at our local government leaders, you look at the people that put their hand up to be volunteers. Many, if not most, are business owners. So understanding that nuance and that connection, which kind of leads me to the point that Rob touched on around that capacity for economic development, around taking those assets and that asset-based community development into and transforming it into leveraging it as an economic opportunity. And I think Rob made another great point about balancing the needs of community, region and state, and really leveraging those natural synergies. And it sounded like there was certainly where the energy was in the room around, but we want to work more strategically together. How do we do that? And I think it was Gihan that mentioned he could witness or see the natural leaders that were stepping forward and going, yeah, this is possible, I want to make this happen. So, and I think echoing the minister's desire to have the CRCs and the CRC network be driving their own agenda, I guess. So perhaps that's an invitation to draw from this group the people that are willing to have this group work much more cohesively and collectively and strategically together. There were a number of examples about what's been achieved, which is wonderful, to plant some of those seeds, and I've seen some really wonderful magazine covers, so I do hope that I see these on the front of The Countryman, Farm Weekly, other publications in the years to come. And the other thing that I really loved today was in terms of one of my favourite sayings is seeking forgiveness and not permission, and I think it was that point about saying yes and then working out how. And in the context of that, saying yes and working out how, the how part is really important. I mentioned before about understanding your why or what it is that makes your community tick, but it's that how that's really critical. And as Gihan mentioned, it's you do have to. We do have this uncertainty, but it's critical that we do have a plan. Things, it's that old cliche of the only thing that's certain is uncertainty itself. So we do know that there is going to be change, but without having a plan and without kind of coalescing our resources, we're not going to go anywhere quickly. One thing that Greg from WACOS, that was a bit of a wake-up call for me in terms of we had all these wonderful messages about, what's possible and imagine the future. And then he quite rightly said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. We've got some really challenging social challenges that we're going to face in the region. So I think that was really sobering for me and kind of bringing us back to reality. Whilst we can be optimistic, it was again what Gihan mentioned about being a realistic optimist. We know it's going to be hard. We know, and what we've discussed today, some of the things might have been really challenging and the future. We don't know what's tomorrow. Whilst we did hire a futurist to come tell us what next week's going to look like, we do know that it is uncertain. But, so in the context of that realistic optimist, we know it's going to be hard, but to succeed we need to believe, and that's where that whole belief in yourself and having that plan to know, where to go next. So amidst all of this uncertainty, and it was great, and I think I thanked everyone at the time around having that robust discussion where we did have a bit of tension in the room, and I think that's needed. And there's no point having white elephants in the room if we're not going to name them and address them. So I think whilst there is a lot of uncertainty, the Minister certainly echoed to us that there is a commitment from state government. Whilst we don't know the timelines around that yet and what that's going to look like, there is a real commitment, certainly from this government and from the Minister. So that was really heartening to hear, albeit the details are yet to be refined. So that's kind of the summary for the day. If I've missed anything, forgive me, it was a jam-packed day and we got there in the end, although I did have to use the cowbell just a tad to make sure that we were all on track. So I am going to, get to the end of the... Okay, so what a day. Now for the closing remarks and the fun stuff. So, well, it was all been fun, but the part where we actually get to kind of take a step back, take a big breath and go enjoy ourselves. So, Nigel, for those that haven't been to the Dome or the Farmers Home Hotel, that's where we're going to be heading off to next for our networking event from 5 o'clock. So it's on Fitzgerald Street, so the main street that cuts through town. So yeah, we'll see you all there from 5 o'clock. Now, after all these presentations, discussions and mapping of the future, we all get to head home with pockets full of these gems of wisdom. But gems that you keep in your pocket won't help your respective communities realise the rare and special value that they hold. What I know to be true, and this is what Gihan reinforced, is that when you make a commitment and vocalise it to someone else, there is a greater chance that you'll take action. The other thing that I know to be true, and that happens to be the title of a bloody great song, is From Little Things, Big Things Grow. So we've imagined up some pretty specific medium and long-term visions for our respective CRCs and communities, but what we need to do is take the first step. To round out the day, I want you to make a commitment to having a conversation with at least one person back home. I want you to share what you've learnt, those gems, what you've heard, that you thought, yes, I don't know, my English is terrible. That could work for my community. So effectively the gems that you've seen that you think, yep, that's I'm taking that home. So in the style of wrapping out with one commitment, I want you to turn to the person next to you. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I want you to make a commitment. Who are you going to speak with? What are you going to say? And by when? Who, what, and by when? 30 seconds, go. Okay, rightio, wrapping up now. Thank you very much. And a bit like Gihan was saying about putting the deadline in, we're wanting to create some really tangible, whilst we've been talking about these these really great ideas, we do want to see action at the back of this. So hopefully that activity will help, turn, what did you say, miserable no do-gooders, Gihan? The person, 1 in 3 people actually do something. I want 3 out of 3 people. That's my success metric for today. Thank you all for taking this time out, for travelling here, for all of those hundreds, I don't even know how many thousands of kilometres collectively we've travelled. So for travelling here, for being so open, for leaning into the challenging bits and for harvesting the gems. Thank you to the Minister and to the Department for enabling these change agents to come together as part of such a considered and thought-provoking conference. Thank you to all our local living legends who presented today and painted a picture for us about what's possible. Thank you to Market Creations, for Sharon and the team, for all the behind-the-scenes work that makes an event like today run so smoothly. And finally, to you all, forgot that I wrote this bit, and finally, to you all, sometimes I get a little too carried away being a proud West Australian. And today, a regional West Australian, I should say, regional West Aussie, and today has demonstrated to me that I can absolutely continue to be unapologetically so. Thank you for loving regional WA just as much as I do. And to officially close the conference, I would like to invite the Honourable Darren West back to close out, and then we can head to the pub.
Good on you, Liz, you unapologetically proud regional West Australian. Great speaker, all-round nice person and fabulous MC today, so thanks. Look, I'm sorry it was a little bit disjointed between the Minister and I today, but it is a parliamentary sitting day and we've been quite a reformist government and we are passing or attempting to pass through the upper house laws that will change the workplace safety in Western Australia. We think that we can do a lot better in that area in WA. In fact, we're slipping backwards compared to other states and we're going to harmonise all the workplace laws, introduce a law that will of industrial manslaughter where due negligence is shown that people can actually go to jail for causing the death of one of their workers. And I know it's caused some angst in the agricultural sector, but willful negligence is the key words. And every farmer, as I am, that I know, do care about their workers and try our best. And so that's what we're doing today. And Alana is handling that bill. So between us, we've done a bit of a tag between Parliament and here. But we really did want to come here today because politicians do their best work when they listen. And we wanted to come and hear what everyone had to say. And I know there was some robust questions and discussions when unfortunately in that gap between when we were here, but we have got the feedback. And I like Alana a lot. In fact, I reckon she's fantastic. But I always like when you go into a meeting with her, you leave that meeting in no doubt whatsoever what it is that was discussed and the resolution that came out of it. It's all very blunt and on the table and we appreciate that back in return. It makes the job so much easier. So yes, we've had our challenges over the last few years, but today is about looking forward. You learn from the past, you shape the future, and change is the only constant in life. I'm sure that's been said many times today, and as a progressive politician in a quite conservative area where we are grasping change more and more all the time in our agricultural sector, in communications, and so the way that we can deliver services out of our community resource centres. We do appreciate the work you do. A lot of these were set up way back in the days of the Burke government and have survived the test of time through the bipartisanship that can be the party political system. But we believe deeply in the work that you do. We really do appreciate what you do. So thank you all very much for doing it. Great to have the conference in Northam. I'm really proud that we've been able to pull this together. I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in putting today on, the planning, all the agency staff. We've got a fantastic public service who do some really good work across the state. Often goes unheralded, but we certainly appreciate the work that our agency staff do. And everyone involved today, thanks very much for challenging the conference in Perth idea. Why can't we have our conferences in regional WA? I mean, we're better than them anyway. I also just want to acknowledge the great work of the CRC network and the whole of regional Western Australia in your attitude towards COVID-19. We are the most fortunate place in the whole world at the moment. We're the only state in Australia where our economy is growing, and it's because of the Premier's leadership, a very robust and decentralised political system, which we don't always appreciate, but we should now. But of course, the work of the West Australian people in picking up the challenge, doing what was required. It was hard when we had intrastate borders. I've got a daughter in Queensland, it's still hard, but we're doing this for the benefit of those vulnerable in our community. Our economy is going to rebound bigger and better out of this, and I think it's reset the way that we'll live our lives. We've slowed down a little bit. We've been able to focus on things that we didn't before, and we're not so much rip, tear, bust in our lives, and some of that will reset permanently into the future, and I think that'll be for the better. But in the meantime, we've still got a pandemic. It's out of control around the world, and we all need to do our bit, and I appreciated the whole social distancing and hand washing and all of those little things, which is not only keeping us safe from COVID, but has reduced flu cases by about 94% or something across the state as well. So thanks everyone for your roles, because I know anyone who's had to deal with the public, especially during March and April when it was downright scary. You know, we had teachers, we had nurses, we had retail workers, and we had all of you. Thank you very much, because there would have been days when, you know, you probably would have rather stayed at home and worked from home like everybody else. But look, that's enough. You didn't come to hear from me. I just did want to thank everyone for coming out. We'll go down to the Farmers Home Hotel and have a drink. As I said, any good ideas are welcome with us. Any negative that are happening, we want to hear them, because we can't fix them if we don't know about them. And we do appreciate the candour that was displayed today, and may that continue. I look forward to seeing you all in your CRCs one day soon. Have a safe trip home and enjoy the rest of what is 2020. Thank you very much.
Dandaragan CRC is located in the heart of the central coastal region of the Wheatbelt. We manage a full annual calendar of social events and initiatives, including the production of our local phone book and newspaper Red Gum reports. We are the region's connectors and enablers, enhancing the Northern Valley's economic development. With over $80 million of planned investment in the Dandaragan Shire's agricultural, horticultural and mining industries, and the recent investment of over $400 million in WA's biggest renewable energy project, Yandam Wind Farm, our role is pivotal in supporting, connecting, hosting and facilitating the business and community services and relationships, building employment pathways through training, laying the foundations for DPERD's connectivity project, connecting and engaging with Birramurra Aboriginal Corporation on the Beef Project, and with Astrotourism WA's Ewart Business Project. We create increased sustainability and investment in the unique networks throughout our region.
Welcome to the Gihan Perera CRC. Here's just a few of the many things that we do to add value to our community. We produce the local newspaper Crowtails and distribute 600 copies per fortnight. We also distribute digitally through a subscription service. We establish the Gihan Perera Community Garden and host weekly crop swaps. We are a collection point for e-waste and of recyclable items. We're a Trans-WA and Fisheries agency. We assist with financial counselling and tax help. We established the Shop Local this Christmas. We offer one-on-one computer training, job help services, large-scale printing, and are heavily involved with the Easter Fair in Gihan Perera. We work closely with the Gihan Perera Men's Shed and Gihan Perera Progress Association for events, and we have recently established our community dog show and sheepdog trials.
Merredin is a regional centre that has a number of government departments and agencies and community services. So where does the CRC fit in? The CRC is like a citizens' advice bureau. We assist people where we can and provide them with information and access to various agencies and services. We identify the gaps in the community, how they can be filled either by the CRC or other organisations. Community events gaps include a seniors lunch, Australia Day breakfast and assistance with putting on the Merredin show. The business sector, we saw that home businesses, party planners and community groups needed somewhere to sell their products or fundraise. The CRC initiated Merredin markets and hosts 4 markets a year, 2 twilight and 2 Sunday mornings, which have grown over the past couple of years and are amazing. Like many CRCs, we also provide a range of information sessions, workshops and training for the community. The other gap that has come into our community was there was no newspaper. The CRC made the decision to produce the Phoenix newspaper, which is now distributed to 14 towns in the central Wheatbelt. Another gap in our community is volunteers. So the CRC took this on to nurture them, support them and grow the number of volunteers in our community, which has been amazing. The CRC was the main coordinator of volunteers throughout COVID earlier this year, looking after the seniors and vulnerable. We continue to look for gaps in our community and ways we can make a difference.